our preaching is vain. If Christ has not been raised, preaching is the dumbest thing in the world. Because we preach Christ and him crucified. Now, unfortunately, there are some in this world whose preaching is unaffected by the resurrection because they preach self-help and not the gospel. So when I say preaching, I'm talking about gospel preaching. I'm talking about preaching Christ. If there's no such thing, if Christ has not been raised, then preaching is useless, it's vain, it's futile, it's empty. Literally, it's empty. Preaching is empty if Christ has not been raised, because we preach Christ and we preached him crucified. Number two, your faith is vain. Your faith is meaningless if Christ has not been raised. Why? Because the object of your faith is the resurrected Christ. If the object of your faith is gone, it doesn't matter how strong your faith is. What if I'm standing here and I'm just saying this, not because it ever happened to me before. Several years ago in a church where I was preaching. But let's say that I was standing here and I had stood up from a chair. And I'd give my message, having stood up from the chair. And somebody behind me, noticing that I was moving back and forth a lot, decided that in order to protect me, they would move the chair while I was preaching. And I finished preaching and believed with every fiber of my being that there's a chair right behind me. When I go to sit down, will it matter how much faith I have in the presence of the chair? No, because the object of my faith will no longer exist. And your faith is only as significant as its object. And if Christ has not been raised, then the object of your faith is ruined. So preaching is vain. Faith is vain. Number three, we are even found to be misrepresenting God because we testify about God that he raised Christ, whom he did not raise, if it is true that the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, that even Christ has been raised. I'd say that's 3 and 4. Here's what's interesting, that there are people who want to say on the one hand that they don't believe in the resurrection, but on the other hand, they don't want to call me a liar. Isn't that interesting? You don't believe in the resurrection, so you're saying I'm lying. Beyond that, I'm not just a liar, I'm a blaspheming liar because I'm saying that God did something that God didn't do. No. I'm not calling you a liar. I mean, because I'm sure that that's what you believe. Doesn't matter. Remember, faith is vain if there's no resurrected Christ. If you believe there's no resurrection, you believe that everyone who preaches Christ and him crucified is a liar and a blaspheming liar. But ironically, nobody wants to take that step. But logically, you have to. It's irrefutable. Again, that fourth point, don't miss that fourth point right in the middle of his argument. Not even Christ has been raised, which, by the way, already proved. Verse 17, and if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you are still in your sins.